My name is Joanne Abdo, and I am the coordinator of the CroatiaFest 2021 Virtual Festival, our second recorded production. CroatiaFest is part of the Seattle Center Festal series. Before COVID, our one-day event was held at the Armory Building just steps away from the famous Space Needle each October. Now in its 18th year, CroatiaFest is considered to be one of the premier ethnic festivals of the series. CroatiaFest is organized by a committee of volunteers with an additional group of community representatives. This year, our dedicated committee went out on the fields of historic Croatian neighborhoods in Anacortes and Gig Harbor, with tours of their museums and interviews with local historians and those who preserve our culture. Also, today's programming will feature a variety of cooking demonstrations, wine tasting, interviews with Croatian authors, a costume presentation by the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans, performances by the Vela Luka Croatian dancers, Radost, Rakia Band from Chicago, and much, much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Virtual CroatiaFest 2021.
Hi, I'm Mayor Jenny Durkin. I would like to share a special greeting with the CroatiaFest and express my appreciation for the part the Croatian community has placed in the livelihood and culture of our city. Settling in the 1850s, Croats contributed to the development of Seattle and Western Washington as pioneers in commercial salmon fishing, logging, and other industries. Today, in its second virtual festival, CroatiaFest offers traditional music, performances, cooking demonstrations, historical interviews, and much more. Please accept my warmest regards for an enjoyable festival.
Bay Cafe is located in Fisherman's Terminal in Seattle, serving breakfast and lunch 7 days a week from 7 a.m. until 2:15 p.m. We hope to see you soon.
Here, boy, I am.
Island Net and Design, who works closely with Jovanovich Supply, builds, designs, and constructs commercial fishing nets, mainly gill nets and purse seines. For over 45 years of net hanging experience offers fishermen a solid net they can depend on.
Hello, I'm Barry Martinez, and I am here at the Anacortes Croatian Cultural Center. I guess I'm supposed to say why I'm here, and that's because my father's father came from the town of Komija. My father's mother's parents came from the town of Komija, and I have been involved in Croatian cooking for about 20 years now with my friend Maria Petric. since my children started dancing for the Bela Luka Croatian Dance Ensemble.
Hi, I'm Katerina Petrush, and my grandmother owns the Croatian Culture Center, and I have helped her bake and cook here for
All of your life.
all of my life. I just,
Since she was a toddler, actually.
yeah.
Is that all you have to say for yourself? Besides being wonderful and adorable, and I just adore her. And I'm Maria Petric, and Julia Maria Franulovic Njalo, born in Bela Luka many, many moons ago, right at the start of World War II. And our family immigrated to the United States over a period of years, and we landed in Anacortes, Washington. And my grandmother was already here. So what we're doing today is we are making one of her recipes, Maria Marinovic Franulovic Brizmic. She was married to my grandfather, who died at age 36, Pavel Franulovic Njalo, and she came to visit relatives in 1938 here in Anacortes, Rudolf and Kata Franulovic, and she got stuck here with the war and couldn't return. And subsequently, she was able to bring us out of the misery of our immigration in 1949. And she is the one that has taught me many, many things, primarily cooking, every conceivable way of fixing chicken, fish, vegetables. She taught me how to make zea, which is another wonderful thing we might consider showing how to do at some point. But she also taught me wonderful, simple dessert, well, sweets, because we're not big on desserts, but sweets that are usually picked up easily and eaten with Turkish, followed by a swig of Turkish coffee, or prošek, or slivovitz. Sometimes with slivovitz and coffee too. So anyway, this is one of her recipes, and which God bless Barry. She was able to put this down in intelligible, typed versions, because our collection of recipes is unstained, the scrawl, and I'm amazed that she can read my cursive at all. So this particular one has had an evolution. Most of our recipes start out with, they are yeast-based recipes, and this one has now become baking powder leavening. So it has had an evolution, but still it remains fairly similar to the original. So there you have it. Okay?
Rija,
Okay.
we are going to beat 4 eggs until fluffy.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It's different from doing it when we do hüstele.
we can take it down and show.
Yeah.
Here's how they should look.
Foamy.
Yeah. Okay, so now we can
Okay.
go to the dry ingredients.
Two.
So now that our eggs are fluffy, we're going to sift together the dry ingredients. 6 cups of flour, 1.5 cups of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 4 heaping teaspoons of baking powder.
Sugar. Where's that? Oh, that guy. We need that actually. Just a minute. because the stuff, like the sugar, you know, comes kind of toward the top because that's all there's room for in the sifter. So this just makes it more evenly distributed, right?
And I'll get the butter out of the refrigerator.
And then we work it in.
We've already chopped up 2 sticks of butter, half a pound,
Okay.
and kept it cold.
This is really interesting, doing this in front of the camera, because I used to work in a jewelry store, okay? And had Burton Jewelers in Anacortes, which was a really fun job. I loved it because all that gorgeous stuff was there. And so a lady from Connecticut came in one day and she said, I must have some tiny things that I have to send back east. And so I thought, what kind of tiny things are we going to find? So anyway, I searched and searched and searched, and they had to be about, well, not more than an inch and a half in size. And so I went to the Lennox cabinet and looked, and there were all these little dishes and little pitchers and various and sundry articles, and finally there were these tiny angels about that size, and she wanted 12 of them, and she wanted them each gift wrapped individually. And I thought, oh my goodness, okay, yes, of course, you know, because the customer's always right. So anyway, all the time that I'm wrapping these little angels, she was looking at my hands. You know, these are gardener hands, okay?
Right, yeah.
And so she's looking at my hands, and finally I go up to the counter. By this time I'm getting fairly self-conscious, okay? So anyway, I go to the counter, to the cash register, and finish this whole financial transaction, and she said, you know, I've been looking at your hands. You have such great coarse hands.
Thank you very much.
And all the rest of the ladies, sales ladies, were watching this, and Laura Burton and Doug Burton, and they were just hooting at my discomfiture.
Coarse hands.
So for months afterwards, all my girlfriends knew about this, and they'd give me stuff and hand stuff over to me. Do you think you can handle this with your great coarse hands? It took us months to get over that. But you know, it wasn't that I didn't feel bad. It was just that it was funny. But
And you artfully wrapped 12 little tiny angels.
yeah, tiny little with those hands, you betcha, baby. Okay.
And it's a sweet story.
Well,
It is a sweet story.
yeah, but I loved working there. Yeah, speaking of sweet stories, there was this is a story on a Croatian lady. These are all Croatian stories, okay? Anyway, 2 ladies, Mrs. Milat and Mrs. Olic, came in the store one day. They were neighbors on 17th Street, and they're looking for a wedding gift. And now Mrs. Milat, bless her heart, who is adorable, I just adore her. Anyway, God rest her soul. And she her delivery was kind of shrieky, okay? Really, I mean, her voice had a dissonance to it, and she spoke very loudly. And so, anyway, we went to the back of the store where they had some really special things, and I had laryngitis. I couldn't talk. And so, I mean, I could talk, but not much came out of my face, you know. And
Compared
so,
to her volume.
right. So I said, Tamara, can I help you with something? And she said, yes, you can.
That's great.
The entire transaction was done
In the whisper. That's perfect.
Had so many great stories from working at Burton's with Croatian ladies. It was really fun.
Yeah.
They would always, well, of course, the Burtons would, no matter who came in, whether they were Japanese or Italians or Frenchmen, or Croatians, they figured, okay, she's the translator, go get her.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was the one that could, never mind that I couldn't please speak Japanese, I could speak Italian and French, but not any of
In
that.
Spanish.
And Spanish, but not German
Having
or,
lived in all those
yeah,
places.
yeah, but not German and not Japanese.
But Latin.
Well, yeah, at that church life. Yeah. So anyway, getting back to this, so as I did that, I thought, my great coarse hands, they want to be on the television, as my father used to say. Okay.
You got gorgeous hands, Bubba.
Hard-working hands,
Oh well, come on. Lately I've been out.
artful hands.
God forbid I should put on my gloves, right? When I go out, I'm a compulsive weed puller out there in the garden. Okay, so Barry, you take a look at this and you tell me if you think it's okay, because sometimes, you know, two considerations are better than just one.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. Okay, now.
So now we need to finish zesting 1 lemon, which we're going to then whisk into this before we add the wet ingredients, right?
Right too.
Does that look good?
Yeah, that looks good, and
Do that by hand.
yeah. Oh, thank you. Now I want everyone to know that this is an honest to God bubba bowl. I have many bubba bowls, and that's the way we learned to cook. My mother, we always cooked for hordes of people at our house, because we started, as kids, we started cooking for my dad's cruise. When
But
they
this
would
isn't
come.
even the largest one.
No, this is
This
just,
is a half-size bubble bowl.
yeah. So anyway, everything we mixed was in one of these great big stainless steel bubble. They became to be called bubba bowls, but they were just big stainless steel
It's big
bowls.
cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we always had, so everybody in our circle of friends and relatives calls them bubba bowls.
Okay.
Okay.
So now Maria's going to make a well in the center. I'm going to heat up a cup of milk, and then we're going to add the milk and the eggs. See what you think.
Just put it through my hands. We don't want to cook the eggs.
Right.
Well, we will cook them eventually, obviously, in the baking part, but, yeah. This is, Bubba's great coarse hands are working just great here.
They taste sweet.
Now,
It's right
one
here.
of the things that my Bubba taught me early on is you have to be really neat. So you always pick up all the dirty dishes and you keep the area clear of impediments. Once you're done with something, you have to put it in the sink
Clean it
and
immediately.
clean it, yeah, clean your area up immediately. You know, and my dad too, he was a sailor, you know, he matriculated as a master mariner at 19, but one of the things, he was stopped when he went to Maritime Academy at age 12, is, they called him Mali of Cuisine. You know, they started him out as a helper in the kitchen, and that's another thing that teach you is on a ship, obviously, everything has to be stowed and put away, and you don't want to have anything sitting around. So, of course, my mom, she would use every pot in the kitchen, and it was left there. So we had constant, how shall I say, friction, not bad, but good-natured calling out. Why are you living on that stuff like that? Okay.
But you can't cook without making a mess.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I guess I'm just going to have to make that mess there. And I'm going to need, I think, a little bit of flour. Huh?
Okay.
Now, what we're going to do now is, now what we're going to
You're
do,
gonna need it?
we're going to need the sifter, absolutely.
Are you going to need it?
No, we're not going to need it because, and that's a good question, Katha. I'm glad you asked that because if we need it, then we make it tough. So we don't want to make it tough. We just want it's going to be really soft dough, but not this soft. Okay, it's got to be. Yeah, you want a little bit more on my fingers so I can get it all off my fingers. Okay. So what's that, about a 1/4 cup there that you're adding? Yeah. And you gotta keep you have to keep all these sides nice and clear so you don't get little itty bitty pieces inside that are hard to stretch out.
But it's a nice soft dough.
Yeah, it's really very tender, and that's why we have to put it in the refrigerator and let it solidify a little bit. Otherwise, we won't be able to roll it out. Okay, so there you have it. Okay.
All right, off to the fridge.
Yes, off to the fridge we go. Katha, would you like to put that in the fridge on the bottom shelf, honey? This plum jam, as everybody knows, comes from our trees at Big Bubba's house. And this is an Italian plum, and it's cooked without pectin and just boiled so that it simmered, I should say, not boiled. It's simmered to the point where it becomes the consistency that you see now. I know there are many ways to make jam, but this is the one that my grandma taught us.
So while the dough is chilling, we are making the filling and also greasing the pans. And Maria's using obviously her homemade plum jam. To that that's 4 cups of jam. To that we're going to add the zest of 2 oranges and 2 cups of chopped walnuts.
Okay, so zest. You zest.
All right.
Okay, I add these, and you can add the orange put right inside.
All right.
Okay.
And you'll notice that the pans are being greased with Crisco, which is Maria's preferred
Well, the reason I prefer it just became a habit. That's what my Baba used over on 15th Street. She always used Crisco, although there was times, though, that was kind of interesting, that we used just vegetable oil. And now I'm at a loss to remember exactly which of those things it was that we used just the oil for. But this is one of those where we use the Crisco for. But there were others. When we would grease the pans, it would be oil, and it would, I know what, the bread.
We use the oil for the
Yeah,
bread.
we use the oil for bread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose Crisco's better than butter in the pans because it doesn't change the color.
That's right.
Baking.
Butter has a tendency to burn things, so make the color darker, and the temperatures at which we bake is
Too hot for butter.
yeah, it's just too much for butter. So that is so pretty. Look at that. The
How do you want to have the other orange,
Yeah.
please?
the walnuts and the orange, and then this tricolor is really
Delicious.
nice, really nice. Now Barry has lovely hands. She doesn't have great coarse hands like Bubba here, so she's managing to do that.
But I have to say, when we make our big batches of Hostala and other things, my hands don't last as long as yours do.
Well, my goodness gracious, this is good. You don't want to use these for a hand cream ad. They would probably use it for the before picture.
Okay.
Okay, madame.
Then we go.
Very good. There we go. And so now we just stir it in. Look at that. Is that yummy or what? It's just yummy. It's yummy to taste without even cooking it, because these are all ingredients that are just lovely
It's amazing.
in and of themselves. So now after all that pretty contrast with the individual ingredients, we've got this really pretty, deep burgundy look, and the walnuts. Gorgeous.
Ready to be warmed up?
Yes, indeed. So go ahead. From the old wolf range. There. So now it has to be done at a really moderate or low temperature, otherwise we're going to have
Burnt plums.
burnt plums instead of warm plums. Okay, so
Now that our dough has chilled, Maria is going to divide it into 4 pieces and roll each piece individually on a lightly floured board. For this, we're using a canvas, which works really well with rolling dough.
especially dough that tends to be really soft. Boy, this one's going to be a challenge. Now we can put the rest of it back in the fridge.
Okay.
We're going to have a hard
2
time.
pieces going back in the fridge. These are for the top, just to keep the dough chilled.
Now, what we're going to do is we're going to roll it out. And it's the kind of thing that you can roll it out, you can get it to a tentative size, and then you just push it up against the sides to fit it in. Okay, it doesn't have to be exactly that size in terms of squareness. So obviously when you're rolling things out, it's different, right? Now, the beauty of having a soft dough is that, you know, you can do all these remedial things by, where's my, see, if you need to patch a corner in, you can do that. Nobody's the voice. Because this will be covered up, obviously, with filling and a nice lettuce. But you have to be a lot more. Can we put that in the fridge for just a little bit? You have to be a lot more careful with the lettuce first. You can go ahead and piece these little sections in. Okay, now we can spread. You want to make sure all those holes are all covered up too, if there are any little niches, because then you don't have to scrape the bottom of the pan. There we go. Okay, so there you are.
Want me to spread this
Yes,
now,
please.
or should we wait to do the next one? Is it okay to spread it now?
Yeah, go ahead and spread it, and
Okay.
I'll get started on the other.
We'll use about half the filling. It smells so good.
Tell them there's filling in process, we're not open.
They're just watching.
And here we don't need to leave an edge.
No.
We just
No.
go all the way
Yeah.
to the edge with the
Yes,
filling.
that's right.
Okay. Should we wait and see if we have enough and even it out when we have the second pan?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll be making lettuce now. That would be L-A-T
Yeah.
and not L-U-C-T.
So we start with the longest strips.
first. Yeah.
So you start with the farthest apart corners. You're making about inch and a half strips.
Okay, I think we can fit.
Ha. Here we go. Okay.
Very-
Bravissimo. Okay.
That looks beautiful. Oh,
Thank
good job.
you.
We still got some left over
You need to
I
use
think
a
I can
lot.
put a little more over here because I can still see dough. I think we did do it pretty evenly.
though. Okay.
Maybe?
And even a little more on this side, so you can still kind of see.
they're so fragile. They just tear so easily. It's not really even steel, but it's gonna have to work.
And once the lattice is made, then we'll trim off the ends so that it's perfect in the pan.
It's a challenge handling this stuff because it's so fragile, because it's so soft. And also because my hands go clomp clomp. This is not good. I don't like
What
that.
about that one? The thin, the narrow part of that one, maybe. No?
You know what? This. I think we don't need any more.
I think that's good.
Yeah, okay. You know, we need the
Do you want to use the
scissors.
knife
Yeah.
or the scissors?
Scissors would be good. You know, one of the coolest things that ever happened to me as a cook was discovering utility shears for the kitchen. And I had to get those when my husband, you know, would bring home game. You know, we used to have these amazing game dinners, and I had to have utility shears to cut the pheasant or the goose or whatever in half. Anyway, and then I discovered I could do all kinds of cool things with utility shears. Now you can make some thumbprint cookies, so we can save that one for the next guy, huh?
I think we'll save this one.
Yeah. Where should we put that? Over there somewhere?
Right here, maybe?
Yeah. And then we'll save this for thumbprints. There you go. And I'll start on the next one.
Daj gramo malo sitne vole, to šokice vole. Daj gramo malo sitne vole, to šokice vole. Lolo moja učeni snaše, što će biti od ljubavi naše. Lolo moja učeni snaše, što će biti od ljubavi naše. Ale volim.
So now we'll put these in the oven on 325 degrees
Yes.
for 20 to 25 minutes.
Yes.
And we're going to rotate the pans, turn the
Yeah.
pans halfway through for even baking.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Let's do it.
here's our lightly browned Marisha.
Yep. Okay.
So once the Marisha is fully cooled on a wire rack in the pan, we can cut and serve.
Yes. So I always start at the center, you know, and just like this, and cut it in equal sections. Do you see how far off center I am?
Yeah.
Good grief.
But it's the center of the weave of the lattice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what governed my. So what we shall do
Please
Let's
make
go.
it easy.
is go this way and this way, okay? Because if we did maybe a little larger, it would be impossible to serve. You know, it's way too big. So I don't know what happened to my square going to have to be a dual kind of thing, huh? Gosh, this one in the corner, it's here sticky. Okay. Alright. Okay, 2. And we should have Turkish coffee with this, right?
Yeah.
But I haven't made it yet, so. And we have no minions to direct right now to do that for us, right? So we may have to go with cafe latte.
Yeah.
Or an americano, right?
Or Slivovitz.
We have plenty of
Now that our work
Slivovitz.
is done.
Yes, we have Slivovitz, and we have Roshek, we have sweet wine.
Nice.
Okay, so any one of those things might work, huh?
So,
Okay.
shall we say Dobartak?
Dobarte.
Celebrating 50 years, the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans have provided the youth of Seattle the opportunity to study and perform the folkloric traditions of their ancestors through music, song, and dance, with travel, friendships, and fun. Now accepting new members ages 5 to 18. Be a part of the tradition. Visit our website at seattlejuniortammies.org.
Dobar dan I dobro nam došli. Good afternoon and welcome to the second of 2 segments entitled Obnovimo stare užance, Renewing Our Old Traditions. The intent of these 2 programs is to share our work in recreating and preserving Croatian folklore 5,000 miles away from the old homeland. This segment was filmed on the stage of McCall Hall at the Seattle Center. Those of you who joined us last year saw museum-quality original garments in the collection of the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans, which were sewn in Croatia. Today, we will display for you recreations of traditional folk garments sewn right here in the US of A. We hope that you enjoy this virtual folkloric tour of Croatia through select pieces from the collection of the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans. Thank you and enjoy.
In 2020, the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans marked their 50th anniversary. Due to COVID, a celebration of this milestone will be held in 2022. Co-founded in 1970 by Richard Major and Tom Krpetich, the group began with 10 youngsters playing tambura. 2 years later, kolo dancing was added. There was a long tradition of tamburica music and dancing in the Seattle area in the decades prior to the founding of SJT, with groups directed by Andrew Skrivanich and Anton Shushain in Seattle, Bellingham, and Tacoma. The Tacoma group performed for President Woodrow Wilson during a visit to Tacoma in 1914. In the 1950s, the Seattle Kolo Club, spearheaded by Eleanor Mikulich-Korvas and Louis Krpetich, performed regularly at community celebrations and traveled to the San Francisco Kolo Festival in 1954 to learn popular kolo dances. The 1960s was a time of active participation in the Croatian Fraternal Union Lodge 439, Sinovi Hrvatske domovine. In July of 1969, a delegation from Lodge 439 attended the joint CFU convention and Junior Tamburica Festival in Pueblo, Colorado. Dick Major and Tom Krpetich were inspired by the hundreds of youngsters participating in Junior Tamburica orchestras across the USA and Canada, and decided to start a similar youth program here in Seattle, loosely modeled after the programs sponsored by the Duquesne University Tamburitzans of Pittsburgh. Almost immediately, the Seattle Juniors began performing locally with trips to Anacortes, Nanaimo, and Vancouver, BC, Butte, Montana, and a performance at the World's Fair held in Spokane, Washington in 1974. The Temperitsons recorded a long play album, recorded live in Roslyn in 1977, and in 1986, the group performed at the World's Fair in Vancouver, BC, Canada. The Seattle Junior Temperitsons has traveled to Croatia 6 times and has participated in Croatian Fraternal Union Temperitsa festivals in Anaheim, Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Nashville, Orlando, Pittsburgh, Toronto, and right here in Seattle. On their most recent tour in 2018, they performed at the International Children's Festival in Šibenik and nationally on Croatian television's morning show Dobro jutro Hrvatska. In 1978, the group acquired its first set of imported costumes from the region of Baranja, which were acquired with the assistance of Hrvatska Matica Iseljenika of Zagreb and donated to the group by Croatian Fraternal Union Lodge 439. Baranja is located in the northeast corner of Croatia along the Hungarian border. The female garment is made of hand-spun and woven linen and then embroidered and pleated. This particular garment has a wool woven apron and a wool woven sash. Since the original set of costumes only came with the dress, apron, and sash, the Seattle Junior Temperitsons' parents made elaborate headpieces and slippers and socks, which were knitted by Venka Morovic and her daughters Alenka, Neva, and Rosie. The man's Baranja costume consists of a linen shirt and pants with a distinctive vest. This particular garment, along with a dozen more, were acquired from the West Wind Ensemble of the San Francisco Bay Area. For festive occasions, garments were adorned with thousands of metal sequins, beads, and ribbons. This shirt was spotted in a second-hand store. Modeling our costumes today are Gus and Ellie Schaefer. Gus and Ellie have been members of the Seattle Junior Temperitsons since childhood. They trace their roots through their grandmother on the Budnic side of the family, who hail from Veliloshin or Lucin Grande in the North Adriatic. While the vast majority of Croats in western Washington trace their roots to the Adriatic Islands, Lika, Gorski Kotar, or Herzegovina regions, a few hailed from the interior. One very active community member in particular, Milan Bartolec, was born in Koprivnica in the Podravina region, also bordering Hungary. As the name implies, Podravina lies on the Drava River. To honor Milan and the Bartolec family, the Temperitsons debuted a new choreography depicting traditions of the eve of St. John's Day, called Ivanje. The finished product of this nošnja from the town of Koprivnički Ivanec came together using a variety of sources. The skirts, shawls, and aprons were purchased from the Živili Ensemble of Columbus, Ohio. The embroidered sleeves were purchased from the Koraci Croatian Dance Ensemble of San Jose, California. Koraci had these beautiful pieces commissioned for their Podravina costumes. To finish off the costume, SJT seamstress Sarah Schaefer authentically recreated vests called kožulići and headpieces called oculice, using patterns and designs from the book Narodna nošnja Podravine, written by Katica Benc Bošković. The region of Međimurje, situated north of Podravina, also borders Hungary and spans the Pannonian Plain and the foot of the Julian Alps in Slovenia. These garments were sewn by Susan Stafura of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Susan was the longtime seamstress for the internationally famous Duquesne University Temperitsons. Garments in Međimurje have a similar silhouette to those on both sides of the borderland. What makes this garment different from that of Podravina is the use of lace for the sleeves and overskirt. Shawls are often pastel in color, made of embroidered fabrics, and are called tibetrobec. Headpieces in Croatia tell the marital status of a woman. whether she is single, married, or widowed. Young girls will wear a lace headpiece called poculica. We now move east to the region of Bačka, one of the three subregions, along with Srem and Banat, which comprise the region of Vojvodina. Bačka is home to Croats called Bunjevci, who moved in the 17th century from Lika and Dalmatia in search of more fertile soil. Bunjevci are known farmers and horsemen. The area has always been prosperous, as can be seen by these traditional garments with the use of imported silk from France. These recreations of garments of Bunjevci were sewn in 1986 by a group of SJT parents led by Mary Dragovic. The costume consists of a cotton blouse, which is often embroidered with gold thread, a vest trimmed in gold braid, and a skirt which is sewn in the shape of a square, then gathered to create a full silhouette. Oftentimes a bustle will be worn around the waist in order to accentuate the shape. Bačka is a wealthy folkloric region with many folk dances and songs. Best known is the Bunjevačko Momačko Kolo, a rare trio dance with one man and two women in which the men show off their fancy footwork. The man's costume features a silk vest with gold buttons. Attached to the boots are spurs which create a jingling effect. In the online programming of CroatiaFest 2020, we displayed an original garment from the region of Pokuplje. This year, Ellie and Gus are wearing other pieces from our Pokuplje collection. Pokuplje means the area along the Kupa River. This set of costumes was purchased from the Živeli Ensemble of Columbus, Ohio, and was donated to the Seattle Junior Tamburitzins by Barbara and John Vukas, whose three children were longtime members of the Seattle Junior Tamburitzins. Unique to this garment is the headpiece called kapica, which is made of silk ribbons adorned with many hundreds of seed beads and mirrors. SJT directors Brenda Huber and Joanne Abdo spent countless hours sewing beads to our kapice using traditional designs found in the book Narodna nošnja Kupinca by Ivanka Barać, with instruction from Croatian costume expert Greta Kos from Vancouver, BC, Canada. Beaded necklaces called grlinček were created using brightly colored vintage beads made of glass, metal, and were constructed with individual steel beading wire, which hang vertically from the embroidered ribbon tied around the neck. These were made with consultation with Kud Bratiničko Srce in Bratina, Croatia. The costumes of the Posavina region are undoubtedly the most recognizable of all Croatia. Located on the Sava River, which borders northern Bosnia, the region is known for fertile farmland. We are going to look at two original pieces from our collection. This is a unique example which is nearly 100 years old. It is woven in three pieces, a blouse, skirt, and apron, which are then painstakingly pleated. Accessories include a coral necklace, and often a necklace made of coins. This would be worn to Sunday Mass, weddings, and other important feast days on the Roman Catholic calendar. This all-white costume shows the beauty of the costume with tone-on-tone embroidery and lacework over woven linen. It was donated to the Tamburitzins by Stephanie Cannon. Textile specialist Carol Freeman described the lengthy process in creating this fabric. Linen is created from the flax plant, which take a lot of nutrients from the earth, and so special attention must be given to how and where it is grown. Once picked, the seeds need to be removed, and the unusable fiber in between the inner core and the outer layers of the plant need to be freed. This is done in a process called retting, which involves placing the flax stalks in a stream for about 9 days, then dried in the sun. The fibers are processed on a flax break, which chops up the outer non-usable layers, then run through a flax comb with long iron teeth, removing the waste and arranging the spinnable fibers into a form that one can spin from. The fibers are then spun into fine flax thread, using either a spindle or a small spinning wheel. Saliva was used to help bind the fibers as one is spinning. It is only then that the weaver can set up her loom. This linen is very fine fabric, woven anywhere from 20 to 70 threads per inch, depending on how fine the fabric is intended to be, with weaving, widths of 3 to 4 feet. It was then embroidered, pleated, and sewn. Moving further west, the Ogulin Valley is situated between the mountainous and Pannonian parts of Croatia and is surrounded by the regions of Gorski Kotar, Okuplje, Lika, and Kordun. The main two centers of this region are Ogulin and Plaški, towns situated on two opposite sides of the valley. While large settlements of Ogulinci live in Pittsburgh and in Toronto, only a few settled in the Pacific Northwest. In the interest of preserving folklore of Tambritsan families and expanding the folklore range of the ensemble, the group debuted a suite of songs and dances depicting wedding traditions of Ogulin, which is the birthplace of Milan Stipetic, father of SJT graduate Željko Stipetic. In 1997, SJT had the opportunity to perform in Ogulin and have a reception with members of the local performing group where they were able to learn traditional songs and dances. Our host presented us with books notating songs and dances and patterns to sew the costumes. The women's costume consists of 4 parts: the blouse, jumper, apron, and woven sash. They include the košuljak, bluza, kambrik, zaslon, and tkanica. One unique feature of this garment is the veil-like headpiece with a red ribbon called kambrik and tuban. These recreations were sewn by Catherine Morovich using patterns from the book written by Nerina Ekel, published in 1986. Unique to this region are the blue waistcoat called haljinac. The island of Susak, also known as Sančego, is unique, as it is one of the few sandy islands on the Croatian Adriatic. The name Sančego comes from the Greek word sansegus, meaning oregano, which grows in abundance on the island. Seattle is the home to many from the island, with the most unique folk costume. Around the turn of the century, a mass immigration became as Susak vineyards were infected with a root disease called phylloxera, which devastated the main source of income for the island. The Seattle Junior Tamburetsons in 1994 became the first junior tamburetsa ensemble to present folklore of Susak and was dedicated to the dozens of Sančegoti living in Seattle, particularly in West Seattle. There are a few unique features of the Susak costume called komižot, which sets it apart from other Croatian folk costumes, primarily the shortness of the hemline, the many petticoats, and the vibrant hot pink color scheme. Originally, this garment looked like others in the northern Adriatic, as it was longer and made out of dark blue fabric. But around the turn of the century, when a group of performers was invited to perform and represent Susak at a regional folk festival, the costume was redesigned with inspiration from ballet tutus. It is said that in preparation for this performance, the organizers wrote to relatives in New York asking them to send bright-colored fabric. Our Susak costumes were sewn by Susan Oblak. Susan used patterns and an original costume sewn by Domenica Dumica Škrivanić, who in the 1970s sewed dozens of komižoti for the Susak immigrant women in Seattle, many of whom did not have one when they lived in Croatia. In addition to sewing full-size costumes, Dumica Škrivanić sewed several dolls, including this one, which was donated to the Seattle Junior Tamburetsons by Mrs. Helen Škrivanić, whose husband Nick was born on Susak. The island of Zlatin is located in the Šibenik archipelago. For hundreds of years, the young men of Zlatin were seafarers traveling the world. They were also famous coral divers known all along the Adriatic and parts of the Mediterranean. The women remained on Zlatin, farming land in Srima and Zablace, located on the mainland. This was incredibly hard labor as they would row there and back. The land they worked was very rocky, and with sledgehammers they would break up the rocks, dust off the dirt for planting olive trees, vineyards, and their own garden at home. These rocks would be piled high on walls, up to 6 feet high. The men on Zlatin worked on the building of the Suez Canal, and about 50 came to Seattle to work on the construction of the Montlake Cut. Even though the men on Zlatin adopted Western style of dress in the 1800s, the women proudly wore their suknia daily until very recently. This set of costumes was sewn by the Seattle Junior Tamburitzin parents under the direction of Sarah Schaefer, based on an original given to Joanne Apto in 1981 by her grandmother's nieces. Legend has it that the unique red silk scarf was added to the Zlatin costume when a boat loaded with wine to sell in Venice was late and arrived after the markets have closed. Not wanting to return empty-handed, they traded their wine for fine silk. Dugi Otok is an island situated east of the Dalmatian city of Zadar, the 7th largest in the Croatian Adriatic, with 10 towns. Immigrants from Velirat, Žman, Luka, Dragove, Brbin, Veronic, and Bojava settled in the Seattle area, particularly on Bainbridge Island near Seattle. These costumes are from the town of Sali, the largest of the towns, located on the southern end of the island. They were created for a piece depicting Savska Festa, held on the Feast of the Assumption, which included donkey races, with a special award given to the owner of the laziest donkey. Traditional songs and the Salsko Kolo were researched by Sali native Ante Dominis and his daughter Kathy, and was debuted in 1990 at the Croatian Fraternal Union Tamburica Festival, held at Seattle's Fifth Avenue Theater. The Seattle Junior Tamburitzins were able to perform in Sali in 2009. A unique aspect of this folkloric tradition is the Tovarecha Muzika, in which young men of the town parade playing cattle horns to a loud drum beat. The last costume we will look at today is from the Neretva River Valley, surrounding the town of Metkovic. There are many Neretyani living in the Puget Sound region, particularly in Aberdeen, located in Grace Harbor County, and in Tacoma. In the late 1990s, there were about a dozen SJTs who traced their roots to the area, particularly the Krilic family from Bacina, Metkovic, and Komin. Željko Jergan, formerly a member of the National Folk Dance and Music Ensemble Lado of Zagreb, choreographed a suite of dances from the Neretva region entitled Na Neretvu Misečina Pala. This costume is typical of the Dinaric region with a linen chemise, a wool coat, a woven wool apron, and sash. Unique to this garment is a metal belt buckle called pafti, which is worn in many parts of the Balkan Peninsula. These pafti were made and purchased in Bulgaria and were hand-delivered to Seattle by Joyce Clyde of Berkeley, California, after one of her annual trips to Bulgaria. These costumes were designed by the late Kathy Tarabocha. The traditional embroidery on the waistcoat was completed by Joanne Abdo, with designs published by Radojka Bagur. In 2004, the group had the honor of performing this choreography in Metkovic.
We hope that you have enjoyed today's programming, spotlighting our efforts in preserving Croatian traditions. We would like to thank the Seattle Junior Tamburitzins and our models, Ellie and Gus Schaefer. In addition, we would like to thank community members Sarah Schaefer, Catherine Morovich, and Helen Scrivenich. We would especially like to thank McCall Hall, Seattle Center Studios crew and staff, Shane Canody, Greg Zatloka, Heather Ryan, and Andrew Steen. Seattle Center Festal and Festal organizers Heidi Jackson and Vivian Hong. We hope that we will all be able to gather again next year, in person at the Seattle Center. Hvala I doviđenja.
Sokole
Ken Kuzma Hewitt has been working in the fish business since he was 7 years old. His passion for the industry was born from his time working at his grandmother's West Hill Fish Market in West Seattle. Located in Edmonds, Washington, Kuzma's Fish Market is a full-service fresh fish market and eatery fusing the best of Asian and European fish markets. Located at 21104 70th Avenue West in Edmonds. Come visit us and see what we have to offer.
Hi, I'm Joanne Abdo,
And I'm John Morovich.
and today we are at Kuzma's Fish Market in Edmonds, Washington, and we're spending the day here with owner Ken Hewitt, and he's going to be filleting a fish for us today and making traditional burdette stew.
You know, one of my favorite memories as a teenager, my sister can attest to this too, living in West Seattle, was going to West Hill Fish Market in West Seattle, where Ken's Baba, Margarita Andrich, had the West Hill Fish Market, and Ken and his brothers worked there. Tell us a little bit about Baba.
Oh, my grandmother, she's first fishmonger ever, female fishmonger. And yep, she was a workhorse. And she's started this fish market in 1972 in West Seattle, and gave it a shot up there. It was,
She was born in Anacortes?
born in Anacortes. Her father came over from Villaluca, and in the early 1900s, I think he must have been like 14 years old. Him and his brother came over, and came over here. Of course, poverty was horrible back then, and came over here to find a new life. And he went to New York, worked there for a little bit. Went back to his brother didn't like it here, so my great grandfather Nicola said they went back, and he met his wife Vitsa. Then they came back in 1906 or late about 1904 they came back. Didn't like New York, decided they're going to go to San Francisco.
Oh.
And that was 1906. Just before they left, the big earthquake happened. They said, okay, scratch that, we're not going to San Francisco. They took a train to Seattle. And he ended up working at Bethlehem Steel in West Seattle.
Oh, really? Wow.
And figured, he says, well, I'm not a factory worker, I don't like it here. There's a lot of Slavs in Anacortes. Strolled up to Anacortes, boom, fisherman, Southeast Alaska, did salmon, and then ended up buying some property over on the water there. Started fishing crab. Raised a family, four brothers, 2 sisters, and of course one of them was my grandmother. And let's see, from there, of course, then during Prohibition, he was a bootlegger. And he was in a vacant house in between him and his other house, and he had a still going there and everything. And then unfortunately the neighbor turned him in. Did a year at Walla Walla. And but he was a crab fisherman his whole life, and they did a lot of strawberries, 11 acres. My grandmother, all the family worked really hard on that farm. So crab fishermen, strawberries, potatoes, everything, and they go to market.
It's pretty interesting because your grandmother, your Baba, is 100 years old this year.
She's 100 years old. Mm-hmm. Yep. Strong as ever. So,
Strong as ever?
Yeah.
So
100 years old.
there's a big tradition of fish in your family, from your great-grandfather through your grandmother and your mom, and through you and your brothers. You've been in the fish business. Your grandmother started at West Hill Fish in the 70s, and she taught you how to clean a fish, right?
She taught me everything, yeah. 1972 she opened that fish market. And I didn't really know what was going on. Next thing you know, I'm working Saturdays and holidays. And my first job was unfolding newspapers, because we used to wrap fish in newspapers. And so I'd do that all day. And I was probably about 12 years old when she started letting me cut. And so I started filleting out fish when I was 12.
And after working at Grandma's, what career? How did you
How did
extend
it
your
end-
career? End up to where you are now.
So where I'm now, let's see, in 1984, 85, the building was condemned, old fish building. And so she had a lot of other ventures going on. So then I went to Mutual Fish Company after that. And it's a Japanese-owned, American-Japanese-owned fish market. The College of Fish, they go way back to the waterfront. The owner was considered the top, fastest, best filleter on the whole waterfront back in the day. And they opened that fish market back in the 40s and relocated on Rainer Avenue, 23rd, down by Borkiti Bakery, next door actually, basically. And that was in 65, they put in that big, huge fish market. And they did everything, smoked salmon, fish cakes, cannery, everything was going on in that fish market. And so I really thought I knew everything until I went there.
Yeah, so you truly learned from the best.
I learned from the best, and that's
Right.
where my Japanese background kicks in.
Uh-huh.
And so all the sashimi we did there, and the live tanks and everything like that, it was really an education. You can't buy it, not at all.
So here you are. So you've been open here at Kuzma's for 3 years.
For 3 years, but after Mutual,
Oh, yes.
I went to Wajimaya,
Right. Right.
and they were building a new store, the big flagship store that they put in, and that was in 2000. They gave me a call. They said they need somebody to run their seafood program. It's the seafood program, the department they put in there was enormous. And so we talked, worked out a deal, and then I went to Wajimaya and I signed with them. And I was there for 18 years.
Oh, wow.
And you ran the fish program.
Program, yeah, with a great crew of directors at the corporate office. And we opened 2 more stores together, and very successful.
Well, Ken, I think you need to show us what you've learned. Let's learn how to fillet a fish. What do you think?
Well, as we all know, the salmon is the backbone of our Croatian community as far as what fed our families and our biggest industry here in Western Washington, and that's a tradition that passed down through all of our generations. So why don't you give us a little demonstration of how to clean a salmon?
We'll do it up.
Let's go.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right.
Cool. All right, so what we're going to cut here is this is an Ora King out of New Zealand. It's Ora means fresh and alive. This is a farm-raised king. Normally we bring all kinds of wild salmon in here all the time, but when we're out of season like we are right now, I bring in this specialty fish. This fish is phenomenal. It's farm-raised in New Zealand, ice-cold water, 38 degrees. The fish don't even see each other. They're safe practices. They're very sustainable fish. You can eat this fish raw. It's got no parasites, nothing, no antibiotics, anything. So I prize this fish at Kuzma Fish Market. And customers have really taken to it. So anyway, we're going to fillet this fish out. This is old market-style fillet fish cutting here. The difference between market cutting and processor. Market cutting is the best recovery on this fish. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the fins off, we're going to scale it, and we're going to fillet it out. So here we go. So fins come off. Flip this over. Like this. Put it on the paper. Take the scales off. Limit my mess. Here we go. Back in the 70s, we never really scaled the fish. We always put everything on the barbecue, and the scales came off when you cooked it and helped protect the fish from getting overcooked or dry. But nowadays, everybody wants their fish scales, so that's what we're doing. Okay. Good. Drop that knife. Coming at you, Johnny. Okay, now we're going to take off the head. This. Drop our board a little bit. That. Now, first cut right along here. All the way up to the backbone. Now we're ready to split it. If it's going to. Make a little incision here. Give us a track when we take the back. The backbone, you want to kind of, not quite as sawing motion, but nice and easy all the way down to there. Now we take off the bones.
You know what we do sometimes too? See this part right here?
Mm-hmm.
When the Croatian guys would clean fish down at the market and different mongers, part of their benefit was taking these pieces home, and then they could make, they could fry these up, or they could make rodettes, or they could make whatever they wanted out of these pieces, because they did not throw anything away, and of course they would take the fish heads home, because that makes the best.
Oh yeah.
Nothing was wasted.
Nothing. All these things. And of course, take that, throw that in your brodette, or I like to fry this up in olive oil.
Oh yeah.
And garlic. I put a little flour and salt and pepper on that and fry it up in olive oil and garlic. That, a loaf of bread, and I'm done.
Delicious.
I'll sop up that whole pan full of olive oil and juices too. So, trim that up, make it look nice there. Okay. So boom, boom, boom. Save these things if you want. Backbone, these are all probably good parts for your stew or whatever.
Yeah. Ooh, what do we got here?
Okay, we got rockfish.
Scarpina.
Scarpina, yes. And we also got the short spine thorny head. Also, the Japanese call it kinki. Very oily fish, gelatinous, almost like black cod or sable. And we're going to use this fish in the brodette today. I got some marinating in back already. So what I'm going to do is, traditional brodette is the whole fish, cut into chunks, head and everything. I like using this fish. I like using a few cuts of this too because of the oil in there. I like the mixture. Most brodettes got several different fishes. Some will put shellfish in it and mix it all up. I don't do that. I just mainly use the whitefish. It's really, whitefish seems to be the best. Everybody's brodette's different. Everybody says theirs is the best. So be it. But today we're gonna make.
Can't go wrong when you have fresh fish.
No.
A little bit of onions, olive oil, and garlic, and parsley, and your.
So that's
the holy trinity of Croatian cooking.
Yeah, you know, and so anyway, let's. What we'll do here is that those who don't want to do the whole fish thing, you can go ahead and do fillets. but I recommend you leave the scales on. I mean the skin on, rather. So what we'll do is we're going to fillet this one out. With the skin on. So you scale it first. It's like this.
There's usually a fist fight to see who's going to eat the eyeballs.
Yeah. So when you fillet a rockfish, you're right-handed, you start here. Then you open it up right there. Make a little incision here, all the way down to the backbone. Across the top there. Break through the rib bones here, and a nice, clean cut there. Flip it over, and do the same thing on the other side. Here, there. Break the rib bones. There, and nice, clean side.
Oh, wow. That's perfect.
Okay, so this is ready to go. So you can either skin it, which I didn't, but we're going to leave the skin on. That's for those who are a little squeamish and you just want some nice fillets in your brodet. So, and then you go ahead and cut it up into pieces like this. Marinate it for a few hours.
In what?
Garlic, olive oil, parsley, a little bit of salt. And what I do is I take, and that when I marinate, I take all my garlic and I mash it up into a paste. Fresh garlic. Don't use that store-bought, it's already peeled. There's a difference. I know, I can tell that. Take your time. But that's made by usually traditionally by the head of the household. Usually that's tradition. The head of the household makes the brodet. And it's a pretty easy dish, but you can mess it up. You got to care. You got to take your time. Mash up that garlic. Put a little salt in there. Mash it up. Add your olive oil. Chop up your parsley. Mix it all up together. A shot of lemon. Mix it all up with your fish. Let it sit for at least 2 hours. That's it. And so you do that with this. All right. Good enough. Now we'll move on to cooking.
Great.
So we're going to make some brodet and polenta.
Yes, indeed.
This is the
yep.
This is the stuff.
This is the stuff.
This is the best.
This is where the rubber meets the road. Yep. We get our temperature right. Olive oil.
Okay, so you got to start with olive oil.
Yep, start with olive oil. Put that in there right now. Shot of that. I'm not doing much measurements here, you guys. Just doing what I do.
So you warm up that oil, make sure it's hot before you start.
Good
right?
and hot, yeah. Now this fish has got mashed up 10 cloves of garlic in it.
Oh, wow.
Some use 5 and 5. I use 10 and 10.
Good for
I
you.
just love garlic, so that's all there's to it. Cut back whatever you got to do. So we're going to heat this oil up. I'm going to put this in here now. You can put it in early, the garlic. Let that sizzle just for maybe 30 seconds. Just a little bit. That's good. Take a whole onion, sliced up.
You know what they call this part in Croatian? Šufigati.
Šufigati, yeah.
It means saute. Okay, so that's a
Uh-huh.
really. Whenever you start with making anything with fried onions and garlic, it's what they call šufigati.
But yeah.
So what do you make? What else do you make here on the stove?
Oh,
Like
the stove. We're doing a lot of different things. Make our fish cakes here.
Oh, really?
And that's a Japanese style fish cake actually. And we do eel unagi bowls over hot rice.
Wow.
We make our clam chowder here. I got a special recipe of clam chowder. Make it every day.
Really? No
yeah,
kidding.
tons of clam chowder.
Wow.
Tons of it. Yeah.
So you're not only a fresh fish market, but you also sell prepared foods as well. Brilliant idea.
Boom. Okay, now you're going to take your tomato puree. This is fresh tomatoes. Not tomato sauce, nothing like that. This is straight tomatoes, nothing else. So yeah, make sure you've got a couple shots of that. Take a look. See where we're at. See how you like it. Turn that down a little bit.
Pomidori.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Another shot. Just because I feel like it. There we go.
Oh, that's got a great color.
Nice color, huh? Boom. Yeah, I like that smell. Okay. Take some dry white wine. It's expensive, use cheap, as long as it's dry. Don't use that sweet stuff or anything. A shot like that.
Do you ever make a brodette here for the foresti?
Oh, yeah.
I bet you that people would.
They would do, yeah. They would love it. We're looking at doing bacalao.
Oh.
Serve it cold, which would be nice.
Yeah.
A little shot here. Just because. All right. 5 minutes until the acid is out of the wine, so. A little bit. That going. Boom, boom, boom. Give me a piece of paper.
I used to love to come see you guys in the summertime because the boys would already be there and I was out of school, so I'd go in and flirt with the brothers, right, Kenny?
That's right. I remember when I was dancing in the group, and I forget where we were performing, and the first time I met you guys, you weren't in the group yet, and you guys both came there, and
that was probably about.
I remember my brother Dave was like, "Who's that?" You know, Joanne.
And it hasn't changed all these years later.
Turn that down just a little bit so we can do something else here. Now the fish. I'll take that. Nice head there. Just making some room. Look at all that nice stuff going on. Freaking beautiful. Look at that. All right, so gonna add a little salt here. Throwing some pepper. Get it all over that fish. Yeah. Everything all nice and going here. Boom. Yeah. Now we're going to take this and put it inside here. Everything in there. Everything in there. Put enough water in there to just barely cover everything. Boom. We'll bring that up to a boil. We'll cover it.
Poklopite.
Boom. 20 minutes, it's going to be done.
Oh.
That's it. Get a nice piece of fish there. Some of that channel kinky fish. That head puts so much flavor into
Yeah,
this.
it's the best part.
Best part. There. That's on the side. Nice dab of that. There. That's a lot. That's that. Boom. All right, you guys.
All right, this
Dig
is our
in.
brodette, huh?
Mm-hmm. Nice and fresh,
Polenta.
clean. You can taste the fish. Yeah.
Mmm. Wow.
Nice and simple.
Mmm.
Little taste of heaven. Well done, Ken.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
Delicious.
Now you all have had a little taste of Croatians in Washington State. Brodette di polenta, živjeli.
Jubilee.
Well, this concludes our day at Kuzma's Fish Market in Edmonds. They're about 20 minutes north of Seattle. And on behalf of CroatiaFest, I'd like to thank our friend Ken Hewitt for spending the day with us. We learned a lot. And I also just kind of want to let you guys know, this guy over here, he was a member of the Seattle Junior Tamburitzans from 1972 until about 1986, I think, Ken, right?
It's about 86, I believe.
About 86. Some fond memories, travels together, and yeah, we were dance partners. The best dancer that I recall, and we're still involved. So for everything, Ken, we thank you on behalf of CroatiaFest.
Thank you for coming, you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ken, for showing us your salmon cutting skills, your brodette, and this is just a testament to what we've been able to maintain of our Croatian identity, and we get to share that with people all across the United States, Canada, and beyond. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to the next episode. Hvala, doviđenja.
Doviđenja.
The Croatian Fraternal Union is a nonprofit organization designed solely for the benefit of its members. Its main purposes are mutual assistance and the promotion of Croatian culture and identity. Headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and operating through a system of lodges in the United States, Canada, and Croatia, the Society celebrated its 125th anniversary in 2019. It is noteworthy that Lodge 5-6 in Roslyn, Washington, founded in 1897, is the oldest lodge west of the Rocky Mountains. Seattle Lodge 439, founded in 1911, is the largest and most active lodge in the Pacific Northwest. New members, adults, and children are welcome.
Malo Međimorje, mesto mi rođeno, gde sam si ja zebral, grlicu ljubljeno. Malo Međimorje, mesto mi rođeno, gde sam si ja zebral, grlicu ljubljeno. Kušno biti lica, draga grličica, a da je med nami globoka vodica. Kušno biti lica, draga grličica, a da je med nami globoka vodica.
Vutim koli do dva, mila draga, vutim koli.
Ljubav za te sedam
The historic Slavonian Hall event facility, the only Croatian hall in South Puget Sound, is located in beautiful Old Town Tacoma. It is a wonderful venue for most any event: weddings, receptions, birthday parties, recitals, concerts, banquets, and meetings. For more information, call 253-627-6878 or visit our website at slavhall.org.
Hi, my name is Joanne Abdo, the coordinator for CroatiaFest Virtual Festival 2021. Today we will be visiting the town of Gig Harbor, Washington, located an hour south of Seattle, Washington, across the Narrows Bridge from Tacoma. We will be visiting the Historical Museum, a fishing vessel, and the Scansey Net Shed. Along the way, we will be interviewing locals from Gig Harbor of Croatian American descent, and they will be sharing their stories and traditions. I hope you enjoy our segment. Here we are at the Harbor History Museum in Gig Harbor, Washington, and we are here with curator and director Stephanie Lyle. She's going to give us a tour today of the museum, tell us some stories of the first settlers here in Gig Harbor who were Croatians. Let's go ahead and take a tour.
Okay, it's
Let's
so
check
fun
it
to
out.
have you here.
All
Come
right,
on.
thank you.
Yeah. Welcome. Well, welcome to the Harbor History Museum. We're so excited to have everyone here and to share a little bit of the founding of Gig Harbor and our Croatian history. But it's really important to remember that Gig Harbor was occupied before any of the Croatians actually arrived. There was a large village here called Twalkush, and the people that lived here were the Squabopsh people, who were a band of the Puyallup tribe. Squabopsh means swiftwater people, which makes a lot of sense when you look out the mouth of the harbor at the swiftwater running through the Narrows Bridge passageway there. So Gig Harbor is this wonderful little space, and people say that Sam Jarosic discovered it in 1867 when he was down here fishing. Now that's quite possible. There's slight alterations to that account. Some say it was a dark, stormy night. Some people say he was just fishing. But really, we don't know that for sure. And as a historian, I have to have evidence of this kind of thing. So I look back to every source, and unfortunately, Sam never left a really, really specific designation of like how he came upon Gig Harbor. There are retellings of that story in various versions. So, but we do know that he arrived here between 1867 and 1870 because we have found some census records and immigration records that suggested his wife Anna, who was a First Nations woman from the Penelakut tribe in just south of Vancouver, right around Vancouver, Canada. She came to this area and with Sam and her daughter Caroline, and that was immigration records at about 1870. So Sam Jarosic came to Gig Harbor about 1867. He was fishing with two of his crewmates from the big sailing ships that he had crewed on over the years, and came into Vancouver, Canada. They bought themselves a rowboat, and they came southward through Puget Sound, fishing and sailing as they went. It was Sam Jarosic, his crewmate Peter Zlatorich, who translated or Americanized his name to Peter Goldsmith, because Zlatar is gold in Croatian, and John Farragut, who was a Spaniard who also crewed on sailing ships with Sam and Peter. So the three of them were fishing together. They come down here, and depending on the story, it might have been a stormy night when they needed someplace to stay. It may be that they just found this great little harbor and thought, wow, this would be a wonderful place to settle down. Well, they had ties in Vancouver, Canada, and obviously went back up there. There was actually a large Croatian community in that area on the south bank of the Fraser River. And there is also a large native First Nations presence on the islands up there. And Sam met and married a woman named Anna, who is from the Penelakut tribe. That's now, it was Cupper Island, and now it's called Penelakut Island. And they came down and settled in this area. There were actually three Native people that came down with Sam and Peter and John, and that was Anna, who married Sam. Her maiden name, as we know it, is Willish, and then her daughter Caroline, who was about 2 at the time, And a third woman who's a little mysterious, her name is Millie, and she wound up marrying Peter Goldsmith. She was about 5 years younger than Anna, so she was actually, depending on which year we're able to document, she was somewhere between 8 and 11 years old when she actually came to this area. So she's my mystery person that I'm trying to find out more about, because she I believe, was also Penelakut from up in the Vancouver, Canada island area. So anyway, so you have 3 First Nations people from Canada, 2 of whom are married to Croatian men. So you've got this wonderful cross-cultural relationship happening. But then here in Gig Harbor, we also have the Squabosh people who live in a large village right here where the museum stands today, or right in this vicinity where Donkey Creek meets Gig Harbor proper. And I think that there was definitely a time where there was about 10 years where there weren't a lot of other settlers here. And so there was this relationship between the First Nations women, Anna and her daughter Caroline and Millie, with some of the Native people that were already living here. And I really think that because these Native women had skills and knew the landscape so much better than their husbands, they were able to survive. And it really made this bridge between cultures. And it's a pretty unique foundation for a city in America to have that connection. Right. Well, one little connection that a lot of people don't know about is between Nikolai Bezmalinovich and Pascal Dorotich and his son John and their daughter Lena. So the story is essentially this. Nick is Pascal Dorich's son-in-law. Pascal and his wife Maddie, who actually grew up mostly in Canada. Pascal came to Canada when he was about 12 years old, and then he met his wife Maddie Gillich there, and they married, had 2 children, then came down to Gig Harbor about 1910, between 1910 and 1915. And another immigrant that came over from Croatia was this young, tall, robust, eager and excited individual named Nick. And Nick came, the story goes that he came to America with like $15 in his pocket. And when he got to New York, he was swindled out of about $11, and so he had $4 left. And he took that $4 and he rented a rowboat, and he went out and he fished. And he came back in, he sold the fish, and with that money he bought the rowboat. And then he continued to fish until he had enough money to come westward, which was his original plan. So he came out here, fished in Alaska for a bit, connected with the community in Tacoma and then later Gig Harbor, and ultimately marries Pascal Dorich's daughter, Lena. Nick is kind of equated in Time magazine, in Life magazine, as the Horatio Alger of the Northwest. And he got his start really fishing, but he realized pretty quickly that the guys who were making the most money were the cannery owners. And so he bought his first cannery in Alaska in 1924. It was a kind of defunct cannery in Todd, Alaska. He borrows money, he buys that cannery, and the one thing that he really needed were tenders. And tenders are the boats that collect fish from the fish traps near the mouth of the rivers up in Alaska and bring them to the cannery. So he talks to his brother-in-law, John Dorotich, his father-in-law, Pascal Dorotich, and they decide that they're going to build a tender right here in Gig Harbor. And the name of that ship, or the name of that fishing boat, we call it Great Ship, named after an airship probably, as we have discovered, is the Shenandoah. So the Shenandoah is in the collection here at the museum, and we look at these connections between these families and this enterprise that's actually happening. Nick Bez was known for continuing his relationship and building his relationship with Croatian fishermen throughout the whole time that he owned canneries, from that first cannery in 1924 until his death in about 1969. His last big cannery was called Peter Pan Seafoods, and we still know that company today. And many of the Gig Harbor fishermen fished for both Peter Pan and Bumblebee in the times that Nick owned those companies. Okay, a lot of people ask us, what's the big deal about the Shenandoah? Well, this boat is a 65-foot wooden purse seiner that was built in 1925, at the Skansi shipyard. The Skansi brothers were from Croatia. They built it for Pasko Dorotic and his son John and his son-in-law Nick, and they were all from Croatia. So it's a Croatian-built boat. It was fished by 2 Croatian families, because after the Dorotiches, the Genoviches ran the boat, and they were actually third cousins of the Dorotiches. So it has a very strong Croatian tradition. Not to mention the fact that it was actually built at Skansi shipyard under the tutelage of Sam Kaslin, who was the shop foreman, also brought over from Croatia to help build these Skansi boats that became so signature to our area. Skansi boat building operated from about 1910 to about the 1940s, when World War II broke out, and really was an integral part of Gig Harbor's history. They weren't the first boat builders in the area. They were actually about the 3rd or 4th, but definitely have a strong presence, and their signature were 2 kinds of boats, purse seiners and ferry boats. So they built some of the early car ferries here in Gig Harbor as well that ran the Gig Harbor to Tacoma route. Those are very distinctive because that design has actually perpetuated through Washington history, and the ferries we know today are very, very closely aligned design-wise to the early car ferries designed and built at Skansi shipyard in the mid to late 20s. So the Shenandoah was built for a man named Pasko Dorotic. His story begins actually when he leaves Croatia. He's only about 12 years old, and it's 1872. He sails across the Atlantic, comes to a community near Vancouver, Canada, on the south bank of the Fraser River called Ladner, or Port Gouchon. And Pasko grows up there. We don't know a lot of details about his life at that point, but we do know that he was married to a woman named Maddie Gillich, and they had 2 children, John and Lena. Later, between 1910 and 1915, Pasko, Maddie, John, and Lena moved to Gig Harbor, this wonderful new place that has this very strong Croatian community. And we think that because Maddie was Gillich, that might have been the draw, because there was always already a Gillich family here. Now, Pasko was a fisherman by trade and also a boat builder, and his earlier boat was a boat called the St. John. In that wonderful tradition of naming boats after saints and your firstborn child, St. John was a smaller seiner that actually could fish both down here in the Sound, in the Puget Sound area, as well as Alaska. That boat actually continued to fish until the 1980s and was lost at sea in a terrible accident where the entire crew was lost and drowned. But that aside, Shenandoah has a life beyond, and we call it the boat with 3 lives. First as a tender, second as a seiner, and third as a teacher here at the Harbor History Museum. So we're really taking an unusual approach to the conservation and restoration of the vessel by taking the port side back to its 1925 original design, adding back the portholes that were there and redesigning the bulwarks to their original design. And then this side that I'm standing on is actually going to be fully restored to about 1970 and be mid-catch. So you'll have a fisheye view to look up at the catch being brought up in the net to get that full experience of what it was like on board a Croatian fishing vessel. Probably with all of the sounds, the accents, everything, it's going to be wonderful. So it's really exciting to be able to plan this out and see this restoration coming together. So
Here we are at the veteran fishing vessel with veteran skipper Mike Scrivenich, and we are about to take a small tour on the boat today and talk to some Croatian American fishermen. Tell us a little bit about the history of the veteran, please, Mike.
Well, the Veteran was built here in Gig Harbor at the Skansi shipbuilding, which is a Croatian-owned shipbuilding, in 1926, and the boat was donated to the Gig Harbor Boat Shop about 5 years ago. And so we've been, with all volunteer work, we've been doing all the maintenance and painting, and it's, as you can see, it's just a gorgeous boat. It's a classic style purse-seine boat. I think they built about 50 of them here in Gig Harbor, and there's only a few left. And so we got to keep this one. We got to keep this one pristine. So for the history.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. Let's hop on board.
Okay. Thank you.
Go.
We'll go with the eldest first.
Oh yeah, eldest. Yeah.
I'm Michael Scrivenich, and born and raised in Gig Harbor. Started commercial fishing actively as a teenager in 1964, and fished for quite a few years with my dad on our boat out of the harbor here for salmon, almost exclusively Puget Sound. And then I fished with my cousin Ralph Sulich in Bristol Bay for 14 years, and that was a real good fishery for me because it was always before the fishery down here, so the timing was good for me to go from one to the other. It was awesome, so it worked out really good. So yeah, my grandfather came to Gig Harbor, like I said, in 1909, and so we've just been here a long time, so like all of us probably. Yeah.
Nick Babish, I actually started when I was 12, and still fishing 45 years later, but I turned 13 on my dad's boat in Alaska, and then we had the unfortunate happening of where he left us, so I actually started fishing with my little brother, which isn't supposed to be the way it goes. He's supposed to fish with me, but I realized that he knew a hell of a lot more about fishing than I did, so I don't think so anymore. He probably does. But now we fish in Southeast Alaska, and we do squidding in California, and it's kind of same old, same routine every year, and hope for the best, but we'll hope for better than last year.
Yeah, I'm Andy Babich, been in Gig Harbor my whole life, third generation fisherman, and yeah, grew up just wanting to be a fisherman, I guess, at a young age, and started going out when I was 13 on Puget Sound up in the San Juan Islands. And yeah, like my brother said, my dad passed away at a fairly young age, so we kind of were fortunate enough to keep doing it, and with a lot of help with some local families here in Gig Harbor, and things just kind of kept going that direction, and we still fish. You know, I've fished California for squid and sardines on the Washington and Oregon coast, fishing salmon up Prince William Sound, southeast, fished Dungeness crab on the Washington coast. So right now I'm just kind of doing the crab on the coast and fishing up in southeast or Prince William Sound for salmon, and just kind of enjoying life, you know. And it's been a great life here. It's like a grandfather came over from the island of Broch, Sault Martin, in I think 1913, if I'm accurate on that, and it's pretty awesome. Got a chance to go there a couple years ago and see it, which was pretty incredible. And
people have asked us too what we want to do when we grow up. Like, it's a hobby. That fishing isn't actually a career, so we tell them that we are grown up. And the best part, I think, when people ask you what you if you would have done something else, what would you rather have done? And there's actually nothing I would have rather have done than what we're doing. And he said with the families, that it's a close community, and everybody wants to be the best when we're fishing, and it's kind of cutthroat, but I think Gig Harbor's pretty well known for, if there's someone in trouble, they help. So we're pretty fortunate to have people that, especially when our father passed away, that kind of took us under our wing and looked out for us. And so it's a community that really cares, and it's the industry that really cares. And it's if you had to do it all over again, I would do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think too, part of our, like as a kid in Gig Harbor, part of your routine from after school was to go down to the docks, or there was more activity, and a lot of the fishermen, if they're hanging nets in the spring, and you're welcome, you know, as part of your childhood was you're welcome to go, you know, see what was going on, and to visit, and you're around a lot of I look back now, and a lot of the experiences I had, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was, you know, now it's pretty incredible because you spent time with with the old timers, or it was just your everyday life. You didn't think much of it, but it's, you know, it was, for myself as a kid, it was kind of a routine, just the waterfront, you know, to be welcomed, you know, a small town, and everybody knew everybody, so it was just great childhood.
It was safe, you know.
It was very safe.
Safe and good.
Yeah.
And, see, now I'm an old timer, damn it.
I think we're all getting.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I still want to go out when it's
opportunity arises, you know. You just, it stays with you. And when I'm out on the boat, if I go with Andy or something out here as a non-crew member, but just come out with them, my eyes are on the water constantly. I'm looking for the fish and looking at the tide and we're talking back and forth of, you know, hey, what could we do different or better, or, you know, it's just it's
yeah, like those were the good old days. Now we get crews and they look at their Facebook account and they look at
like Mike is a good example. He fall fished a few years ago when he was working at Crowley. He had some time off because he's got the fishing bug. He likes to fish, and so I was lucky enough to have him come out and run the skiff for me. But it was a real joy because you have a professional, somebody that's done it their whole life, and to come work together, and we had a lot of fun. I mean, it was a great time because you're dealing with somebody that's passionate about fishing and that's more experienced at a lot of the stuff than I am, but we're working together and having a good. It was, like I said, we had a great time fishing.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. Maybe he'll do it again sometime if I could talk it into it.
Yeah, I fished with Nicky Jerkovich one fall, and you, and it was just any chance I get, I'm going to go.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
So, but this boat here was built here, Scansey Shipbuilding, in 1926, and it's been through a lot of upgrades, and it's been a lot. The guy that we got it from, Nick Fahey, lives up by Anacortes area, and he donated it to the boat shop, and he's put a lot into this boat, and he just loved the looks of it. It's a classic. There's not too many like this around anymore, and so it was in need of a lot of work, and he did it, spent money on it, which, you know, the fishery didn't warrant that much money to be spent, but it was like his baby, you know. So
you do become fond of these boats.
Yeah.
So like you said, they're telling me to get rid of my wood boat, and I've had it for 30 some years, and you love it.
Yeah.
So you just don't want it. I don't want anybody else to touch it. So it, as he says, the boat doesn't warrant the money, but it's like a bad child. You still take care of him.
Yeah,
so.
pretty much.
Yeah, and it's obviously from looking at the boat and the shape it's in, it's amazing how when something's taken care of, how incredible, because it's still the boat's beautiful and maintained, and hopefully will be around for a long time. But pretty great piece of history right here.
It's got 95 years in already.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah. Well, we tie up. As soon as we start tying up, people walk by. God, that's a beautiful boat. You know, that happens constantly. It's amazing. It's a classic.
Oh, for sure.
Boats look different now. They're different designs, but this is that old classic design that we all grew up with. You know, so it's fun to have one to look at. You know, and I get to drive it. It gets me.
Well, Mike's the only guy I think that knows how to drive it. It would take us half a day, I think, to figure out how to drive this thing. He's got more of the old skills.
It's not user friendly, let me tell you.
Jeez.
Well,
we always tell him that.
Nick Tarbocha told me, he said, don't try to be above average. He says, you've got to try to be high boat. You've got to shoot for high boat. You know, if you don't make it, that's something, but don't be shooting for even above average.
What do you say, though, too, about corking? His mother, brother, sister, don't matter. Cork him.
Yeah, he's a tough dude and a good fisherman. But, yeah, that's what he told me. Don't ever shoot for being above average. He said, that's no good.
I actually shoot for being average now because it's really hard to, you have to really be aggressive. There's some young kids now.
That's because you're old, Nick.
Yeah, well,
you're getting old,
they're
too.
just smarter. I gave up. But.
Well, that is the thing, too, is
it's tough.
I think there was one time in my career, like, say, salmon fishing, I think I thought I was good, but then that didn't last very long. And then some of the younger generation now, that's why I've always said that I used to look at certain fishermen and say, well, how can they just go there and just kind of be happy with that and work? And, I thought they were kind of laid back, and I used to think to myself, like, how could you do that? But then I find myself, that's who I am now. I said, now I get it, because I find myself thinking, I'm okay with that. There's a lot of the younger generation some of the kids nowadays, they're so more advanced, and they're faster, and they're smarter, and which is cool. I mean, it makes me feel like I guess I'm getting to that age where, it's not as important. I guess it should be, but
much of the families in Gig Harbor, a lot of them are from Broch, but also there's a tremendous number from Permuda, which the Busich family, Loverovich, Malich, Smirsich family. I can't think of all the other families that were from Permuda, but quite a few. So, and that's a very tiny little island. Sault Martin's a tiny little town of 300-400 people, but Permuda is like an island of 65, 75 people. Yet they came here, and a lot of them produced. And then my mother's side came from the island of Malat, which is close to Permuda, and I found in my family research that I'm related to Mike Scrivenich. His my great grandfather far back was named Scrivenich, and I discovered I was related to people from the island of Susak, which is where the Scriveniches are from. So it's fun to do genealogical research on Croatia. It's very hard, but it's fun. I enjoy the hell out of it. So sorry about that.
No.
Yeah, so we're all related. We all played here when we were kids.
Yeah, playing here as kids seems like we're growing up. We were trying to get to what our fathers were doing. They were fishermen. We couldn't go fishing, so we pretended to be fishermen. We made nets. And we roll all over the waters here, and to try and catch fish with our nets. And I remember, and we spent our whole childhood life right on this bay. And I remember when our mothers wanted us for any reason, they would just get out on the porch and yell,
scream,
and we would hear them anywhere on this bay, because in those days it was quiet here. There wasn't. It's not the noise you hear now.
There was a lot of family, a lot of us around the same age, and we do a lot of family things that the Tacoma Croatians would come out and they'd play cards they'd get together with my grandparents, and they'd have card games and get together once a week. So they were real tight with Tacoma and Gig Harbor. So we got to know a lot of the families from Tacoma also.
The Sault Martin Club.
Yeah, they had a Sault Martin. Yeah.
There was an offshoot of the Sobs. It was a club, Tacoma immigrants and Gig Harbor immigrants that came from Sault Martin, Broch, and they formed their own little club. And they would get together once a month. Sometimes they'd play cards. They'd be at your grandma's house, and down to our house. Yeah, that was fun.
And they were always well dressed. I remember that as a little kid.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Dressed to the hilt all the time. The men always were wearing suits, and the women were all dressed up suits, and the men were suits and ties. And it was something that we kind of took for granted. Then as we got older, it kind of went by the wayside with the rest of the generation.
Do you remember some of those old parties they would have? I mean, they'd always end up singing Croatian songs.
Yeah, that's right.
And I remember I would come down to the dock and fill needles when earlier they talked about it on the docks, when they would fill needles to repair the nets. And my dad was there, and the whole crew, they're all Croatians. And one person would just start humming, and then all of a sudden the words would start, and pretty soon they all interrupted and start singing all at the same time, some Croatian song. I thought it was kind of cool.
It was cool, yeah.
I thought they were nuts, but it was kind of cool.
And every winter when the men came home, one of the things they did was they'd order a truckload of grapes from California, and usually it was like big delivery truck size and stacked to the hilt, full of boxes of grapes, wooden boxes of grapes, and my dad would get his share, and he'd
Blaszko.
Yeah.
That was the guy's name that hauled them over, Blaszko.
Yeah, and they'd get his load and go down the basement and crush them in an old tub, and then we had a wine press, and one of the things I remember about that was he wanted to squeeze every last drop of juice out of the grape. So he'd put the wine press on something and put a jack up against the main beam of the house and start jacking jacking down on the wine, you know, but at the same time was lifting the floor of the house inside until my mother would start yelling at him to stop lifting the lifting the house up, you know, because everything was, you know, everything was uneven up there. The chairs were all uneven and all that stuff. So you'd bend the floor before he'd stop jacking on the grapes, squeezing every drop he could. The first blessing of the fleet, this is something I believe the Ladies Business Association got started back in Danzig. Started it, right. And she convinced, and they convinced all the fishermen back then who were getting ready for the season that the part of our holiday, harbor holidays, was in the end of May or the beginning of June, just before all the boats left, that we should have a blessing of the fleet, send them up north. And so that year, the very first year, I remember about 70 boats showed up. And we had beautiful photographs of it. And I remember being on the Elector with Tony Scrivenich and the Scrivenich family. And every family in Gig Harbor had a boat back then. So it was very, a wonderful holiday. Boats were decorated with flags, and all the families were on the boats, and everybody kind of partied, and we paraded outside the bay and threw a wreath in for the fishermen who died at sea. And of course, the priest was one about, I don't know if he did it the very first year, but he
did. We did it differently. He stayed on the dock.
He stayed on the dock, and he blessed all the boats and said prayers on a loudspeaker, and no one could hear him because it was so, you know, such a big. And this was in front of Ansich Park. And they've had blessings of the fleet for.
Every year since then.
Every year since then.
There was a number of years. Harbor holidays got to be a little bit too much holiday for our local city officials, so it kind of got toned down. And then we went to the Port of Tacoma used to do a blessing, and then we did our own blessing for a number of years. But we've done it every year, except last year we didn't because of COVID. Was the first year in the number of years that we have it. And it's down to the boat. Of course, the boats are a little bit less now than it used to be years ago. And also, everybody's kind of diverse because the salmon season down in Puget Sound here has gotten, we don't get very many days. So boats are in Alaska and California and all over. So it's hard to get the whole fleet that's still around here to get a number of boats. We'll get as many as a dozen to 15 boats for the blessing. So and it's still a neat deal. And actually, we kind of anchored out right here, but we're going to try to get it done this year. I think we're going to go back to Ansich again.
Here we are at the Scansea Net Shed. This is our final stop on our 3-stop visit here in Gig Harbor. And inside we'll take a tour, and we also will be visiting with some locals to share their stories about what it was like growing up in Gig Harbor. We hope you enjoy.
Hi, I'm Andy Babich, the president of the Scansea Net Shed. And Jim?
I'm Jim Franich. I'm the vice president of the Scansea Net Shed Foundation. Lifelong resident of Gig Harbor. Started commercial fishing when I was 15 years old with Nick Jerkovich Sr. going to Southeast Alaska. Got a lot of good memories from that, and just real proud that I can be part of this foundation here with Andy and the rest of our board to be able to offer this location to the public so they can come in and really get a sense of some tradition about what Gig Harbor was like in the old days.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm kind of the same background as Jim, commercial fisherman, still actively fishing, and it's been great to be involved with the shed. We have a great group of people that do tons of work to keep this place open. So normally we're open in the summertime for the public to come view it and learn about the history of the shed and its background. I think it was built in 1910, and the Scansea brothers lived in a house just up here, and that still exists today. And the shed was for building nets and purse seines back when the family had the fishing vessel, the Avalon, and then now we're lucky enough to be able to come down here and share stories and let the rest of the public and the people in the area come down and see what it's like to get actually inside. It's over the water, and it's kind of a unique place to see, so we're happy to be a part of that.
Hi, I'm Nadine, and I'm Scrivenich. Grew up here, and my parents lived right down on the end of the street down here, right across from Stanich Grocery, where we always went and got our food. And we always worried about the fishermen making enough money so we could eat.
Yeah,
Because eating
absolutely.
it was important. And I have two brothers, Don Scrivenich, who passed away about a few years ago, and then my younger brother, who is 11 years younger than me, Mike, who made the pasta fajol today, which was delicious. And Phyllis and I, we had a lot of fun. And whatever she said, I did.
Absolutely.
She is the leader.
Yeah.
So
And our fathers knew each other,
and
palled around all
our
winter long.
dads were good friends and great enemies.
In the summer.
In the summer,
when they
were
fished, they were great enemies.
Yeah. But
in the winter, best of friends.
Best of friends.
I don't think there were any grudges held at any time with any of them. But fishing is competitive, and that's what you do. You try to catch the most. You're catching fish for your family, for your livelihood. You only have so much time you can do it, and you do the best that you possibly can.
I'm Phyllis Tarabocha Orbeck, and I'm one of the gang.
I'm Christine Allen. My mom was the Croatian in my family. Her last name was Ostojic. So.
And I'm Janie Stanich Dempsey. So I'm a composite of two families here in Gig Harbor, the Castellan, which was my mother was from, and the Staniches, of course, which I married. Which I was born into.
Yeah.
My dad had the fishing boat, the Welcome, and we also owned the grocery store here. But it was a good childhood because when I think back, where else can you? One end of the block where I lived was Nadine. The other end of the block was Joanne Molich. So I had two people, meaning, okay, if we were going roller skating, I could go down by Nadine's or I could go over by Joanne's, and pretty soon and it wasn't.
And
the
you were in
roller
the middle.
skates, and I was in the middle. It was the key turn, that was
Yeah.
the big thing during those days. It was just some of those things that we did as kids. And the other thing was, if somebody had a date, you knew who had a date because the light was out on the porch.
Oh, I never heard that one. I never heard that one.
And then I remember Boris Gansey. We all called him Buzz. Well, he was like handsome, and with the jacket with the collar up,
Baby blue
and the
convertible.
He took Mama Nadilka shopping at Stanich's, and us girls
It's
were
her uncle's store.
We
Yeah,
were
my
watching
uncle
him,
and my dad's. This
He's
was a
sitting,
joint.
looking really cool.
Real cool.
Really cool, and we
We
were
skating, roller skating.
Yeah, and then he was kind of embarrassed because Mama came out of Stanich's and says, Boris, you want the ice cream? He lost all his coolness at that time.
He stood in the car and he went. He
But
wanted to evaporate.
We were still in love with him.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. So when the fishermen left, we all would go to the dock when they were down on this end of the harbor and wave goodbye, kisses and everything. Everybody was crying because they knew it would be, 3 months before we saw our dads again. And so then we'd hop in the car after the boat started and run all the way down to the end of the road here and get out and wave our last goodbye, and they'd all toot their horns. That was kind of the sad part too, when they blew their horns before they left. But it was a women's world in Gig Harbor when the men left, because my mom and I would do stuff around the house. She always baked every day. We'd have coffee at 3 o'clock at somebody's house.
Yeah,
And Teresa and I would always show up for the cake.
That was the coffee hour.
Yeah, the coffee hour. And so we'd figure out where the cars were and, go to that person's house. But like I said, we get up in the morning in the summertime, no school. Teresa and I would play. We'd play school a lot.
All day.
She and I ended up being teachers, but we'd play at one another's house. And when dinner time came and our mothers wanted us home, they just get on the porch and yell, and we'd hear their voice and come back for dinner.
Oh, yeah.
So there was never any, my mother would call and say, Teresa's here, she's
No
having
need
lunch.
of a telephone.
So your mother wouldn't worry that she wasn't eating. But how idyllic a time to grow up that was, just to be.
It was a close-knit neighborhood.
It was a close-knit
It
neighborhood.
was being raised by a village in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah. And then we went on your dad's
Phyllis
boat.
has a good one in
And then
Friday
we
Harbor.
Well, I want to tell the one on your dad's boat on the Elector.
Oh, okay.
Eunice and you and I went on the Elector, and we decided to do a commedia for the men on the boat. And so we put on the slickers.
And the boots.
And the boots. And we did Mariana.
And danced on the deck.
Danced on the deck, and Vinca, 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 Ca. And we entertained the crew, who thought it was kind of strange. But we had a lot of fun doing it. Oh, this is how we do it. We're the Sansigo sisters. And they went, what? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Far away in Sansigo, happy, happy Sansigo. We learn the lingo like a lingo. In a how
I don't-
Sansigo.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, who used to sing that, didn't they?
You did, but I don't remember it.
My name is Jack Busich, Jack Dominic Busich Jr., and this is my lovely wife, Patricia Busich, who used to be Patricia Kesich. I imported her from Tacoma, but she went to Stadium, but that wasn't her fault. But,
I loved it.
Yeah, but well, I'm almost 95 years old, and I was born and raised in Gig Harbor, and part of the Ross clan, I guess you'd call it, the Ross Busich outfit. But growing in Gig Harbor, as far as I was concerned, as a young boy, it was probably the greatest place to be. It was friendly. All the kids played together. We made. Our folks didn't have money to buy toys, so we made our own kites. We made our own scooters. We just made things. Rubber guns. We used to steal every rubber tire. In those days, you had rubber tires in your deals, and we'd go down to the Robies, had a garage down here, and Ren's had the motors there, and we get the inner tubes and cut them up, and then we make rubber guns, and we have wars and stuff. But the way it was when we played, if we played up on the hill with the Gilliches, the mother would always say, "Lunch is ready." They'd feed us, no matter where you were. They'd feed you, and that's the way the community was. It was a close-knit community, and we had a lot of parties, get-togethers, and we'd have picnics. And the one big picnic we had was June 3rd, and I never forget it. But Ralph Sulich and we built a cement wall to barbecue area, and my dad and they carved out poles to put the lambs on. And I had Arnold Scrivenich, Ralph Sulich, Martin Marin, my dad, Johnny Stanich, and who else? One more. I think Martin Scrivenich too. But I built this up in the Crescent Valley Pick, and I built a fire in it. And Ralph and I went up 3 o'clock in the morning, and we started the fire with hardwood. I had 9 lambs, and Adam Ross and my dad and Arnold Scrivenich, they put all the lambs on the sticks and stuff. In fact, I still got the sticks. But so I had all the old timers turning the lambs, and we had this great big picnic over at the park. And they're just getting ready to cut the lambs, and I barbecued 300 pounds of sirloin tip on a rotisserie. Just when we started to feed them, we had one of the biggest rainstorms you ever seen. And we had the old community hall up in the corner there, and we were just cutting chunks of meat out and giving it to the families and run up to the community hall to picnics. But and one of the things back there growing up, our families were really close knit. We'd all get, the whole family would go, and my brother and my sisters, we'd go say down to Larwich's, which are relatives, and they lived right up here in the street. And we'd go down to visit them at night, and as kids would play in the basement. And in those days, all the old folks, they did all their canning of peaches, pears, cherries, and you name it. And we'd have those get-togethers, and you always had a lot of get-together type things on picnics and stuff. It was just, I'd call Gig Harbor just like one big family. I mean, that's how close Gig Harbor was. Well, my dad left Bermuda when he was 13 years old, and he on a sailing ship as a cabin boy, and he went around the Horn and came into San Francisco. And in San Francisco, he went to work in Colorado in the coal mines for a while, and then left there. And then he ended up in Gig Harbor. And his brother John came here, and one brother went to South America. Buenos Aires, South America. So we have relatives now there. My wife is in contact with them quite often. And so my dad then met my mother, which was a Ross, and that's how we got related to the whole deal. And my son did go back to Bermuda on the island, visit over there. But I don't know, Gig Harbor is a unique little town, I guess. It's so unique that everybody found us, and now they're all moving in, which ain't good. Well, it's good. I always said it's so good, they're going to find us someday. So enjoy your life while you can. But plan things in, don't plan them out, and maybe you'll get the things that you'll enjoy and keep.
Seattle Center invites you to discover Virtual Festal, a series of cultural festivals showcasing music, dance, food, and more from ethnic communities across the Pacific Northwest. Festal is where Seattle comes together through online and live-streamed events. Learn more at seattlecenter.com/festal.
Skoro saki put kad se mi pogledamo i ne ozdraviš ko da se ne poznamo, a da mi te sebi spat, prvo zna da ti rečem da volim te još. Bilo moja, ti si moj san, ti si moj san, a lag je bilo da si tu ja mi, da te ne poznam, da te ne znam. A lag je bilo da si tu ja mi, da te ne poznam, da te ne znam. Skoro saki put kad se mi pogledamo, ti ne ozdraviš ko da se ne poznamo, a da mi te sebi svat, kad ćeš zaspat, prvo zna da ti rečem da volim te još. Vilo moja, ti si moj san, ti si moj san, a lag je bilo da si tu ja mi, da te ne poznam, da te ne znam. A lag je bilo da si tu ja mi, da te ne poznam, da te ne znam. Vilo moja, vilo moja, vilo moja, vilo
Rosemary Gard's works feature richly drawn fictional characters based upon a canvas of historical facts. Unlike other writers, Rosemary lived among the people upon which those characters are built. She has experienced the life of peasants in Croatia. It began when her immigrant parents sent her to live with her Croatian relatives in the 1950s because she wanted to date a local boy in Gary, Indiana, who was not of Slavic ancestry. The boy eventually won over her parents and they married. He was then stationed in Italy with the U.S. Army, where she again traveled to Europe, which allowed her to visit her relatives and all of the entanglements of a wife of an American soldier trying to visit a communist country. She grew up speaking a number of Slavic languages and learned Italian when she lived there. She was named Croatian Queen during the Gary, Indiana Golden Jubilee celebration of 1956. Rosemary's books give readers a first-person account of the lives of her ancestors who drew water from a well, washed clothes in a stream, slept on straw mattresses, cooked on clay stoves, and worked in the fields. Her works are filled with passion for her characters, written with an ultimate knowledge of a different time and a sharp eye for historical accuracy. CroatiaFest is proud to present an interview with Rosemary in which she shows us treasures from her dowry. To purchase books from her series, visit her website, rosemarygard.com.
Hello, and we're here today with Rosemary Gard, author of the Destiny series of books about Croatians and Croatian immigrants to America. And we're going to talk today about the series of books and how they came to be. Hello, Rosemary. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great. And We wanted to talk today just about the series of books. Now, the very first book, well, all the books have destiny in the name. And tell us a little bit about why it has destiny in the name, and how did these books come to be? Why did you start writing the first one?
Well, I feel I was destined to write these books. My brothers were 18 and 19 years older than I when I was born. Neither one of them could speak Croatian, but that was my first language. And then in 1956, my father sent me to Croatia to stay with my aunt and cousins for 3 months. And I learned so much when I was there. And the costume, the reason I call this book Destiny's Dowry is because they gave me an entire Croatian dowry. And this dress was part of the dowry. This is a wedding dress, by the way.
Now, tell us a little bit about the plot of the book. Now, the book begins with a baby who is born in a convent and then eventually placed with the family.
Yes, she thought she was an orphan, but she wasn't. As the story moves on into the second and third book, we find out who her father really is, and the reason he was wealthy. And of course he could not, the family would not let him marry a girl who worked in a bar in Zagreb. So she was on her own. And eventually she finds her grandmother in Venice. And in this book, she falls in love with a gypsy, and the gypsies follow her to Venice. A gypsy woman follows her to Venice and is jealous. And her grandmother has her marry someone and escape to America.
Now, in the first two books, and the first several books, the main character is Katya, who is featured on the cover of the first two there. Now, tell us a little bit about Katya, and where did the idea for Katya come from?
Actually, I think she's a lot of my mother. And Katya was very independent, and she was smart. And I didn't realize I was using my mother. But as I've gone through the books and I've spoken to people about it, I realized that a lot of Katya is my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, an independent, strong woman.
Mm-hmm. Now, in a lot of the stories, you have said in the past that it is your life experience where you've heard these stories. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing when you grew up in Gary, Indiana. And tell us a little bit about the Slavic community there and what growing up was like.
Well, it was a very tight community. Back in, I was born in 1938, so the women didn't have babysitters. And my parents were older already because their two sons were grown up and had left home. So I went with my parents everywhere. And it was like I was a fly on the wall. I understood everything that was said. They were polite. I mean, no one was rude or out of the, said anything they shouldn't have. But I heard so many stories, and I heard about their feelings and what they thought and how they felt coming to America. And also I was in a lot of taverns, which may surprise people, but my uncle owned a tavern, and which is why in my third book, Milan plays a strong role in owning a tavern. And my father sang with with musicians in taverns, and I could sit in the back booth as long as I didn't wander around. But if I sat in the back booth with my mother, I could hear everything that was being said. And sometimes in some of the taverns, the owners lived in the back, and I could go and play with their children. So I learned a lot. I really did.
Now, in the third book, which you're holding, Destiny's Dance, now that's when the story moves to the United States. We should say the whole series begins in Europe in the late 1890s.
Katya is born in 1892 and comes to America in 1905.
And the reason for there are some smokestacks on the cover. This story then deals with how much of the immigrant population that came here found work in the Great Lakes at the steel mills in New York. Part of the book is in Lackawanna, New York, and eventually the book mostly takes place in Gary, Indiana, in the new steel mill that was just getting going there at the time. So tell us a little bit about life in Gary in that era, in the early 1900s, and what it was like to be an immigrant worker.
It was hard. It was very hard. There were no unions, of course, back then, and if someone was hurt, and many workers were burned, you just went home and healed yourself or died. There was no going to the hospital because no one could afford to go to a hospital. So they just carried you whatever rooming house you were living in, because most of the men just lived in a rooming house. And the woman who ran the rooming house washed their clothes and made food for them. And the bed that they slept in was used. The man that worked the night shift slept in the bed during the day, and the man that worked the day shift slept in the bed during the night. And everyone shared everything. They became a family because they left their families back home. So.
Now on the cover, tell us about the wicker suitcase on the cover. What's the story behind that?
I actually have this suitcase. My mother came to this country in 1905 with this wicker suitcase. We have it. It's getting a little battered now. It's showing its age, but this is the suitcase that my mother carried when she came to this country in 1905.
Well, from Gary then, tell us a little bit about the characters that are mentioned on the front cover there.
All right, this is Stevo, who goes through the entire book. I mean, from 1905 until 1917, which is another book I'm working on now. Stevo, and this is Tomo, who came as an indentured servant, escaped from the man, and became friends with Katya, who was like a stepmother to him. And this is Milan, who owned a tavern in Gary, Indiana. And I have to tell you that this picture is of my son. He came over one day wearing this cap on his head, and I told him, I said, my gosh, you look like the guys that used to ride the buses going to the mills. So that's why he's here. He's Milan.
So then in that book, the characters then, when we move on to the fourth book of the series, the story moves from Gary, Indiana, down to New Orleans, Louisiana. So tell us about that transition and why the characters went to New Orleans, and then also about the book also then starts to talk about the Dalmatian community in New Orleans.
Okay, Stevo was very unhappy. His wife, Katya, he ended up marrying Katya, became ill and died. And he was not happy. He was lonely. And he sold the store to young Tomo on a payment plan. And he didn't want to own the store anymore. He didn't want to be part of it. And in his dreams, his father came to him. Now, his father was a fisherman, and so was Tomo as a young boy with his dad in New Orleans on the docks. And his father had bought a house on Canal Street. And Stevo just had to go back. I mean, he was no longer happy. And he was very pleased that he went back. An entire new life opened up for him. And eventually Tomo sold the store and followed him down there. And these people they're not related, but they're family.
And then the book continues on, and then The following book is also takes place in New Orleans. Now tell us a little bit about Destiny's design.
Tomo had some money, and he bought what was at one time was a dress shop, and he converted it into Little Zagreb, which was a little restaurant tavern kind of thing, and anyone that wanted to could perform for tips. He didn't pay any salary, which was common back then. Musicians would just play for tips, and it was very successful. And across the street, Stevo owned the hotel, so they were still like a family together.
And then when we move on to the next book, which also it takes place partially in New Orleans, Danitsa's Destiny. Now, and the cover kind of tells us a little bit about the plot of the book. Tell us a little bit about Danitsa and why is she walking away with a suitcase and what happens to her?
Danitsa's mother was not a very kind woman, and she was very old-fashioned, and she resented that her daughter wanted to be so Americanized, and that she read so many books. Oh, she read books all the time. And they arranged for a marriage. Back then, marriages were arranged. And she was told by her future mother-in-law that forget about reading books. You're not going to have time to read books. You're going to be working in the kitchen. You're going to be working on the farm. And just forget about being an American girl. You're a Croatian farm girl. And one night, Danica, with her egg money that she kept, because no one knew that she kept some of the money that she sold from eggs except her father, and he saw her leave and he let her go. And she ended up in New Orleans, and she ended up working in the hotel, in the Dalmatia Hotel that Stevo owned. And eventually she fell in love with Tomo, but then there was another person. There was a singer there named John that was interested in her, and so the two men were kind of vying for her, but she ended up marrying John.
Okay, and then we move on to what is currently the final book in the series, Stefan's Destiny. And now tell us again a little bit about what happens with Stefan and the continuation of the story.
Well, Stefan actually is a cousin of Katya's. And because he comes from a very wealthy family and his father was not allowed to marry Katya's mother, so he comes to America to be with his cousin, because he wanted to see what America was like, and he abandoned his wife, who they owned a store together in Zagreb. And he comes looking for Katya. He comes to the store and finds out that Katya had died. And in the meanwhile, the wife that he left in Zagreb, because she had 2 miscarriages, he held that against her. That's why he left her there. She comes to America with her doctor, who loved her, but he didn't want her coming to America alone. And Stefan, in time, goes looking for his wife Barbara, because she's in New Orleans with Dr. Popovich. And it gets very confusing. But he comes looking for her, and he finds her, and it doesn't work out well.
Well, Rosemary, that's about all the time we have today. Thank you so much for sharing the plot lines of your books with us. For those of you out there, the books are available at rosemarygard.com, also at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's available in print version or e-format. So we thank you very much for watching today, and have a great CroatiaFest. Goodbye.
noć, rade moj, moja ljubavi. U tebi je moja mladost rosla i sreća prve ljubavi. Laku noć, rabe moj, moje rodno misto. Laku noć, rade moj, moja ljubavi. U tebi je moja mladost rosla i sreća prve ljubavi. Laku noć, pravi moj, moje rodno misto. Laku noć, pravi moj, moja ljubavi.
Thank you for watching CroatiaFest Virtual Festival 2021. We hope that you enjoyed the presentation. Next year, we plan to be in person again and expect up to 5,000 attendees, enjoying continuous all-day main stage entertainment by some of the finest Croatian dance and music ensembles, cooking demonstrations of authentic Croatian cuisine, and food booths featuring a variety of authentic Croatian foods, including spit-roasted barbecued lamb. A wine tasting will feature a variety of imported wines from various regions of Croatia, as well as wines produced by Croatian-American vintners. The art gallery will display museum-quality original costumes, works of local Croatian artists, and exhibits of Northwest Croatian history. Main floor merchants will sell gifts. Other features include activities for children, genealogy, representatives from the Los Angeles Croatian Consulate, information on travel and tourism, and live Skype sessions from Croatia with legal advice on citizenship, acquiring land, and much more. Last year brought us an unwelcome feeling of isolation and uncertainty. This year came with gratitude and hope. And next year we expect to gather again at the Seattle Center Armory and reunite in celebrating all things Croatian at CroatiaFest 2022. For updated information, please visit our website at www.croatiafest.org.
Ako bi se opet negdje sreli, gdje ti kad moju ljubav htjela. Znam kad snoje, al htio bi znati, je li bi me kod nekad voljela. Znam kad snoje, al htio bi znati, je li bi me kod nekad voljela. Voljela si mene u pogrešno vrijeme, kad sam ljubav svoju ljagu znao. Prohojaše dani, oboje smo sami, oprosti mi ljubavi, žao mi je žao. Voljela si mene u pogrešno vrijeme, kad sam prođe mladost bez voljene žene. Ja sam tada drugoj srce dao, prođe mladost bez voljene žene. Voljela si mene u pogrešno vrijeme, kad sam drugoj svoju mladost dao. Prohujaše dani, oboje smo sami, oprosti mi ljubavi, žao.